Welcome to Handforged, the podcast where real tradespeople share their real stories. Here at Handforged, we're dedicated to bringing attention to the trades, fostering a community of blue-collar professionals, and offering support through shared experiences and insights. Each episode will dive deep into journeys, challenges, and successes of our guests. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the trades, you'll find valuable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice to help you navigate and thrive in your career. So grab your tools and get ready to be inspired. This is Handforged. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Handforged Podcast. We're here with Sal Bellia from Bells & Williams Associates. I've known Sal for quite some time. We've known of each other for quite some time. I know Sal's brother, Ray. I actually did some kitchens for Ray a couple of times. I've known him for a little bit. Grew up in the same town. Kind of know each other through that way. And then, really kind of hooked up via social media. Started chatting a little bit. I see all the stuff that you're doing with your kids and jiu-jitsu and stuff, which is awesome. When I started the podcast, you'd reached out and kind of shown some interest in getting in. And I know that you built a pretty big, successful company in kind of a different industry than probably most people are aware of. Which I thought was pretty cool. We had a really good conversation yesterday. And I'm excited to have you on, man. I'm glad you came in. I'm glad that we can kind of get this thing going and get some of the stuff that you want to talk about out there.
Happy to be here. Yeah, happy to be here. I love what you're doing with your kids and with your business and with the podcast. So love to come in and chat with you.
Awesome, man. I'm glad.
At Seacoast Cabinet, Raleigh, Mass., we offer a full range of services, from design to installation, tailored to residential and commercial applications. We carry 3 lines of American-made cabinetry to fit any budget, ensuring that you get the best quality and value. For more information or a free quote and design, head to seacoastcabinetne.com.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, man? Tell us a little bit about your business and kind of, where you started. And
Yeah. Grew up in Salem, New Hampshire, as you know. Went to private schools my whole life, graduated St. John's Prep, went off to college, and then came home after I graduated, and I was constantly working my way up to get to law school, and I was about a month away from matriculating to law school, and I was doing some landscape work with somebody that you know in Salem, and just saving some money up, and the house that we happened to be working at, the guy pulled me aside and solicited me for a job and said, "Hey, I heard you just graduated from school. I want to come work for my company." And it was a collection agency. I never even knew what that was. I had any idea what it was. I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm a few weeks away from going to law school." Went home that night and thought about it and thought to myself, I've never actually had a real quote unquote job. I've also always done sorts of volunteer work and building up my resume, working hard to get into a good law school. Let me give it a year. Let me just give it a year. I'll work for a year and then law school's always going to be there, right? Went back to the job site the next day and pulled him aside and said, "Hey, is that offer still on the table? I'd like to take you up on it, with the caveat that it'll be for 1 year. I'll work for you for 1 year. I'll work as hard as anyone in your office, if not harder, but then I am going to law school to pursue my dream." And he said, "Great, let's do it." Shortly thereafter, a couple weeks later, I started September 1st. That was 2003. And for the next 5 or 6 years, I worked my way up into management, and it was just a perfect hand-in-glove fit. I loved the industry. I'd never known anything about it, but just my personality and natural kind of skill set lended itself well to that industry.
Interesting.
And I did very well, and I was quite frankly making a lot of money, and still living at home with my parents. And I got to a certain point where it wasn't satisfying enough for me, not just financially, even though I was making more money than I had ever dreamed of at that point in my life. I always wanted more. It was just this hunger inside. I was purely focused on becoming wealthy. And very quickly, I learned that working for this company was not going to get me where I wanted to be financially. And it would be fine for most people, but it wasn't for me.
Yep.
And I also was creating processes. I was doing a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily getting paid to do, right? But I was adding all sorts of value to the company.
Yeah, just being a good employee.
Yeah, being a good employee, right? Absolutely. And just my nature. I just wanted to build and see the results of my work. And I struck out on my own. Me and a business partner, a friend at the time, who was exiting the auto business, got together, and we literally started cold calling from my dining room table. I honored my non-solicitation agreement. I didn't solicit any clients, which I easily could have from my prior employer. Didn't solicit any employees, which I easily could have. Started from literally square one, a table not different from this one, sitting at my dining room table, cold calling potential clients, set up an incorporation through Secretary of State in New Hampshire in 2008. And, we've been at it now for this February 25th coming will be our 17-year anniversary. So
That's crazy,
it's been a good run. Yeah, we actually sold the majority of the company to a private equity company this December 31st. We closed on New Year's Eve day 3 years ago. So it'll be 4 years now, this New Year's Eve coming up, that we sold. So I retained a minority interest in the company. I stayed on as CEO to run the company. But we had a successful exit and it was... I'll never forget when I got my wire transfer from my, I was sitting in the parking lot of a Chinese food restaurant up in Kennebunkport, Maine, and the wire hit, and I just sat there for a second, and it was crazy.
That's awesome, man. I love that. We talked about this yesterday. Like you worked your whole high school career, like you were going to law school, like that was the goal. And
that was the goal.
Your family, you said your father and your mother, like both supported it, wanted you to do it.
Yep.
And then just one day some guy makes an offer and you don't even know what it is. And then you're like, all right, screw it. I'll give it a year. And I think that like speaks a lot about people that can pivot like that, right?
Yep.
It's hard when your heart is set on a goal. And you're this is what I'm going after. This is what I want to do. And then something comes in the way. Most people will just push that aside.
Yep.
It's cool that you took that opportunity and obviously see what had happened for you.
Yeah. My goal was to become financially independent. My goal was to become financially wealthy at a young age. That was my goal. And part of it was born from, I went to private schools, like I said, my whole life. My father came to this country when he was 17 from Sicily with nothing. He really is the self-made man, right? I'm not a self-made guy because I stood on his shoulders, right? Yep. My parents afforded me the opportunity to go to these great schools, and they supported me and let me live at their house after I graduated from school, and made my food and did my laundry, all this stuff, right? I'm not self-made. I don't consider myself self-made. My father really is the self-made person in our family. He came here at 17, like I said, with nothing, didn't speak the language, not a word, and he made it happen, right, over time. So I stand on his shoulders, like I said. But my goal from a young age, because I went to these private schools, I was surrounded by wealthy people. Yep. And extremely wealthy people in many cases. I grew up middle class, right? Comfortable in Salem, you know what I mean? Had a roof over my head, had plenty of food to eat, never went cold, right? Had new clothes all the time, right? And that was great. But when I drove to Andover every day with my dad and he dropped me off at school, I'm looking around and I'm seeing these big, beautiful Mercedes cars and, kids going on spring break and coming back all tanned. And it was just like this life that I didn't know existed until I went to that school, and I wanted that for myself, right? And I saw a path to become that, and I thought becoming an attorney was the way to do it, right? That's just kind of one of the things that clicked. My dad had a friend who was an attorney down in Lawrence, and I kind of emulated him, and I saw his lifestyle, and I said, that's what I want. I want to be like that when I grow up. And now, looking back on all of it, and I came to this realization a long, long time ago, really the first few years I started working and making money for myself, is you can achieve those goals in this country. You can achieve those goals in any industry you want. You could be a plumber. You could be a fireman that has part-time side hustles, if you want to call them that. You can achieve financial independence in a myriad of different ways. It doesn't have to be through those traditional industries that we kind of grew up, doctor, lawyer, stock trader, whatever, right? It's not that way in this country. And so I guess my message would be to anybody listening or any young adult coming up that has the same goals that I did initially. My goals are much different now, but anybody who really has that goal of becoming financially independent, you have to, it's such an old adage, you have to just immerse yourself into something, and you have to be the hardest worker in the room over time. Yep. Not just the first month, 6 months, year that we talked about on the call yesterday. It has to be many, many years in many cases. Sometimes you might catch that proverbial lightning in a bottle, and it might happen quick. That's a rarity. That's hitting the lottery, basically. You can't bank on that. But if you have that kind of stick-to-itness, if you will, a lot of your competitors, they're going to fall by the wayside. They're just going to go away through natural attrition, right? And it's a quality that you don't have to pay a bunch of school money to achieve. You can't be taught it. Sometimes you either have it or you don't. And that's one of the things that happened. So basically, I had this goal in my mind, wanted to become financially successful, got kind of haphazardly thrown into this industry, and I made it work.
Yeah.
I just made it work. And then ultimately, like I said, I struck out on my own, went to open my own shop, and it took about a year before we got any traction. I mean, it was just a lot of rejection, a lot of cold calls, a lot of worrying, because while I'm building this business, my savings is depleting. Right. I just built a house with my wife, and in Wyndham, that same house I'm living in now, and the bank account's slowly dwindling and slowly dwindling, and all of a sudden it's like, is this really going to happen? Are we going to make it happen? And you find a way.
Yeah.
Anybody that has started their own businesses and has achieved any sort of success, they know that sometimes it's smoke and mirrors, and you got to make it happen. And that's a lot of what happened at first. And then it took about a year for us to land our first client, and we started being able to pay the bills, and then we rented our first office up in North Salem, little shoebox of an office. Yeah. And
that was the first win.
That was the first win. That was huge.
Get in the office. It's like, all right, now we're fucking official.
I actually have a key to my own office.
Right.
I'm a dining room table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your dad a little bit, man. I love that story. I love hearing when people come from, overseas and they just kind of land here and kind of get after it.
Yep.
You said he's a barber?
Yeah.
He's 72?
He's 73 years old, barber by trade. He started cutting hair when he was maybe 13 years old in a little village in Sicily called Belpasso, right outside of Catania on the east coast of Sicily. Immigrated here when he was 17 years old with a suitcase and a couple of bucks.
That's awesome. And man, he must be so damn proud of you too.
Yeah, myself and my brother. Yeah, we're both business owners, and I believe he is.
Yeah,
I believe he is.
How could he not be? You
right.
know? That's pretty cool. So, and then you said he did some he has a little investment portfolio. He has some properties.
Yeah, he's got rental properties. So very smart and intuitive on his end, right? He opened up his barbershop. It's in Lawrence, Massachusetts, still there to this day. I mean, it's a labor of love. He doesn't have to work. He could have stopped working a long time ago. But it's a labor of love for him. He loves seeing customers, and now customers that he had back in the 70s, they're bringing not just their kids, but their grandkids in now. It's like third generation customers. Awesome. It's unbelievable when I walk in there and I see these people that I knew when I was a kid. Now they see me with my own kids. Yeah. It's really come full circle. You hear about that all the time, and that's one example of it. But yeah, came here when he was 17, didn't know a lick of English, started working at a barbershop down in Quincy, Mass. Again, same thing, started making a couple of bucks, got a taste of the opportunities available in this country. Then he went off on his own and started his own barbershop right on Jackson Street in Lawrence, Mass, still there to this day. And as he was doing that, he started investing in real estate. So one of his first purchases was the building that he's currently operating in and always was. The old lady sold it to him, and he kind of did what he had to do to scratch up the down payment and went to First Essex Bank, I think it was back in the day, on Essex Street in Lawrence, and took out a loan and that was his first kind of real estate acquisition.
That's so cool, man. So, and we'll kind of get into fatherhood and stuff, because I think that we're both pretty passionate about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, your father was a hard worker. He was working a lot. He, probably wasn't around a ton.
Right.
And now, I know you, the listeners probably don't, but, I see all the time that you spend with your kids. And I guess, what did you learn from your father? Obviously you speak highly of him. There's no resentment there.
Not at all.
I'm sure there was when you were younger.
Yeah, maybe a little.
He's not around, but so what was, I guess, that lesson from your father that you've taken into fatherhood? And how do you manage that balance, man? Because, a lot of people that are, starting their own businesses or working, in the trades are working a lot, and it's hard. It's really hard to manage that balance. And I feel like I've done it pretty well. I always, I'm hard on myself. I wish I could have done it better, but there was some hard points in our lives, but I've always done well to just make sure that I'm making that time for my boys. And that means me getting up at 3 a.m., working until they have to get out of school, picking them up, bringing them to practice, hanging out during practice, dropping them back off, and then going back to work. There was nights that I would show up at the shop at 8 o'clock at night, work until 2 a.m,
sure,
sleep for a couple hours in my fucking recliner in the shop, and then get up and get back at it.
That's the secret sauce right there. Everyone talks about the secret sauce and, all these tips and, entrepreneur this and social media. And that's right there. That's the secret sauce, is working your ass off and doing whatever it takes to make it happen.
Yep.
There's no secret. Most people with common sense know what they would need to do to be successful.
Right.
The question is, do they have the will to do it?
Right.
That's the secret ingredient, is
Right.
the will to do it, and it's done over time.
Right.
It has to be done over time, because you're going to get beaten down. You have to. It's climbing that mountain, and every little notch that you get up, there's going to be more adversity. It's going to get a little bit steeper. It's going to get a little bit slipperier.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You're going to have people gnawing at you and clawing at you and all kinds of stuff, as you know. But yeah, as it relates to my father, growing up, it was, he was working all the time. He was working all the time. And at the time, I was somewhat resentful about it, but now, having stepped in those shoes, I totally understand why he was doing it.
Right.
And thank God he did, you know what I mean? Because he was able to afford my brother and I both opportunities that, had he not done it, and not just those opportunities, but also learning it's learned behavior.
Right.
If you're, there's that old expression, if you're surrounded by 6 millionaires, you're going to become the seventh, right?
Yep.
Growing up in a household with somebody that worked that hard and not being around, it's almost like that pain that I felt sunk so deep that I learned from it. And I learned that, okay, now that I'm on the other side of it, I know now why he was doing it. And he was doing what he needed to do to make sure his business was successful, so that the business could feed the family.
Yep.
And the family would be in a position to be successful.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I would say to any listener who doesn't have kids or doesn't have a family, go all in now.
Right.
Because you don't have that, I don't even want to call it a burden. You don't have the responsibility of other human beings.
Right.
You're only responsible and beholden to yourself. I would say to the listeners that do have a family, to the tradesman or to the, aspiring business owner that does have a wife and or kids, or a husband and or kids, that you have to make that decision from day one. How bad do you want it? Are you willing to sacrifice the time that is afforded to you by having a family? Are you willing to cut a lot of that out for an extended period of time?
Yeah.
And can you play the long game on that?
Yeah.
If the answer is not emphatically yes, go do something else.
Yep.
That's my advice. That's just my advice.
I think that's
and
great.
who am I?
I think it's great advice, man. Like, for me, I made every game. I went to every school event. I went to all of these things, right? Like, I didn't sacrifice that time. I mean, yeah, there's times that I wish I was home after school and, got to spend all this time, all this stuff, and wasn't getting home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and having them actually read me to sleep instead of me reading them to sleep. Because that was a thing for a while. Like, I'd literally come home from work. They would take my work boots off for me, and they had reading homework.
That's
so
beautiful.
They would read.
That's a beautiful thing.
Every night I'd fall asleep.
And your kids will never forget that.
Yeah. They still give me shit for it. They still won't touch my boots. But yeah, man. I mean, for me, it wasn't a sacrifice of that time, because that time was super important to me. I sacrificed the late nights and the early mornings, and the people want to sleep in, or people want to stay home and binge Netflix or play video games or whatever it is. Like, I sacrificed all of those things. I didn't go out partying. I had kids young. I was fucking 19 when I had Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my friends growing up were in the party scene. Most of them are not here anymore, so like, I escaped all of that to be a father and to kind of build my business and to kind of do all that stuff. I sacrificed that time, but I was able to kind of balance that work and working 80, 90. I mean, I put in 100-hour weeks at sometimes, but still was home on the times that I needed to be, and kind of work that balance. So I guess you don't always have to sacrifice the time with the family. I mean, there's going to be some sacrifice there for sure, but sometimes it's just a matter of sacrifice and your fucking own laziness.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think some of it is dependent on the industry in which you choose, right? Sometimes certain industries, you have the ability and the luxury, I would say, to craft hours so that it doesn't interfere with that family time, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you do have to be available during quote unquote normal business hours, because of maybe the industry you're in and the clientele you cater to, and that very well could cut into family time, right?
True.
So it depends on the craft you're in, right? Sometimes working at 3 a.m, until 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever, off hours, when the kids are sleeping and the wife is sleeping and all that, sometimes that's not an option.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say, generally speaking, you have to be willing to execute on that sacrifice.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, there will be a point in time where you're going to have to miss something. I don't care what trade you're in.
Yep.
There will be a point in time. And I would say, even more importantly, if you do have a wife and kids or a significant other and or children, they have to be on board as well, especially your partner, especially your wife or husband.
Yeah.
I was so fortunate that my girlfriend at the time, then my fiance, and now my wife, she was supportive from day one. She's actually the one that pushed me into it. All my friends back then were looking at me like I was insane. They knew what kind of money I was making. They knew my relative cash flow situation was. They knew I was living a quote unquote comfortable life. And they thought for me to risk it and roll the dice on what I had was irresponsible, right? And my wife was the only one that really knew who I was, because again, we were at the time not married, but we were living together for many years, and she saw the individual I was, for better or for worse, but she knew that once I set my sight on something, there was just no question that I was gonna make it happen. And so, thankfully I didn't have to convince her of anything. She was the one that pushed me and convinced me that I could do it, right? The reason I bring this up is because I think that's a critical piece of success. It's a critical part of the equation. If you don't have a partner who's on board with you, a life partner, a wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, fiance, whatever, that is on board with it, that inevitably at some point will create a strife, because their life is going to be drastically affected
For sure.
by how you immerse yourself in that business.
Yeah.
They're going to be alone. They're going to be alone a lot.
Yep. And they're going to have to do stuff on their own. And that was the biggest thing for me, man. Like I split with my kid's mother in, 2012? And I mean, not up until recently did I find somebody that was willing to put up with it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like I leave early. My schedule's not a 9 to 5.
Yep.
Like I have a lot of stuff going on. There's some days that I'm up and out super early. There's some days that I stick around, work from home for a while. And then there's kids, I travel up and down the East Coast with sports, and we're all over the place. And I haven't been able to build a good, strong relationship up until this one because of that. And and I will not sacrifice. My kids are first, without a doubt. My business is second. I'm third. And whoever else is after is fourth and down the line. Yep. That's the way that it is. And like I don't get away from that. I don't stray from that whatsoever. That is where my mind is. That's what I want to do. This is where my values are, and I'm upfront about it. But I feel like sometimes women want these strong business owners and good fathers until they have one, and then they're like, "Oh, that's a lot of fucking work."
That's a wonderful point.
That's
a wonderful point. It's a high pace, high intensity individual that's able to do those things. And there are costs and benefits to that.
For sure.
Now, quite frankly, my wife is the beneficiary of all that sacrifice that she put in. Yep. I put in the work, so did she, in many different ways, right? If it weren't for her, and I don't say this to earn points with her, I don't say this for the benefit of a happy conversation. If it weren't for my wife, I would not be in the position I'm in right now in terms of financially, business-wise, or otherwise. It just wouldn't have happened, because it's not just the support network in terms of logistics and, pick the kids up here or drop them off there, or I need my dinner, I need my lunch, and all the errands and all that stuff. That's not it. It's a lot of it more is psychological and that moral support, because there are going to be days where you fail. There's going to be weeks, maybe months, maybe a whole quarter goes by, and it was like you start questioning things. You start questioning, is this real? Is this really going to happen? Is this feasible? And if you have somebody strong there to support you in that manner, it could literally be the difference between success and failure.
For sure.
There's no question about it. And now, guess what? She's the beneficiary of all that hard work.
Right.
You know what I mean? All the fruits of that labor healthy kids, that's number one. That's something that money can't buy, right? But all the flexibility to now live the life we want to live, it's happening. It's real.
Yeah.
Now it's real.
And be the parents that you want to be.
Yeah, we can actually be the parents we want to be. We're present for our kids. We don't miss a thing. We don't miss a jiu-jitsu competition. We don't miss a practice. Like that's all I want right now. I don't want to go. I don't need any more cars.
Right.
I don't need. You know what I mean? That's not what it's about. It's just the flexibility to now be the dad I want to be. That's the luxury. Everybody online, the real flex is this. The real flex for me is being the dad that I always wanted to be.
Yep.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
and that's what business ownership can do. The money comes and goes. Yep. All the fruits that the money can buy, the vacations, all this stuff comes and goes. It gets tired after a while, man. It does. Yep. What's next? You know what I mean? What's next is these kids coming up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Raising them to have their own success in life, whatever their picture is. Part of it is painting a picture. When I was a kid, I painted a picture of what I thought success was, okay? And then I did everything that I thought I needed to do to go get it, and I got it. Now, that's out the window.
Yep.
Now it's a whole new picture I've painted.
Yep.
I literally will go to bed, or I'm in the shower, or on my drive here to these studios this morning, thinking about my son Sal, my oldest son Sal. He'll be 12 in December. What's he going to be like when he's 18? Where do I want to see him when he's 25, when he's 30? I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And now most of my day is doing things to help support his dreams and his goals. And it's you know that as a dad, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah. So, and we talked about that a little bit too, right? Like, so you know, my son goes to a private boarding school. My oldest son's going down to college to play lacrosse. Like, that's all, for me, return on investment, right? So, like, I've invested fucking hundreds of thousands of dollars into sports and, like, making sure that they're put in the right place, right? So the return on investment is them getting their scholarships to go to college and getting their business degree, or getting scholarship to go to a private boarding school and play lacrosse. And then, you know, whatever happens with my youngest as far as college, like, that's all the return on investment from all the money I've put out there, right? We talked a little bit yesterday about, like, how do you balance that? Because you don't want to give them too much. You don't want to give them a bunch of handouts, right? Because we didn't have handouts. We worked for what we have. Yep. And it built character. It built our integrity. It built, you know, our labor of love, like the way that we work, you know. And, you know, how do you balance that where, like, you want to help them to succeed and you want to see them be successful without giving them all the handouts?
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you balance that?
I spend half of my time up in Kennebunkport, Maine. And one of my neighbors up there has successfully exited many businesses. He's older than I. He's in his late 60s. He calls this the ultimate first world problem, right? And that is having children that grow up in, if you want to call it an affluent household, making sure that they don't get burdened by the affluence. As crazy as that sounds, because most people that aren't familiar with that type of life, they think about what a luxury it would be to grow up in that household. But guess what? There's a lot of burden that comes with it. The most important thing, in my opinion, to be a successful human being is to have a strong drive and a strong work ethic, okay? That's just like a non-negotiable facet of it, okay? How can I make sure that my 3 sons have that strong work ethic if I'm giving them this life that I never had, right? That I always wanted? That's the trick. This is now the thing that my wife and I talk about, maybe every day, maybe multiple times a day, okay? Many times a week, we talk about the fine line that we walk of giving these kids this wonderful life, right? And it's not all material stuff either. There's a lot of love, there's a lot of affection, but the time that we give them, that's a luxury too.
Sure. Because
we have the time to give it to them. Some working parents, they don't have that.
Yep.
They're dropping them off at daycare. They rarely see their kids, right?
Yep.
So the FaceTime and all the stuff that we pour into these kids, that's a luxury in and of itself, right? How do we make sure that all these things that we pour into our kids don't spoil them?
Yeah.
Okay? Simply said. And one of the ways I've done that is actually through combat sports. I put my kids in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kickboxing. They do all this stuff because it keeps them humble. It teaches them hard work. And it also teaches them that I'm not always going to be there to save them.
Yeah.
When they're out on a competition mat and they've got some other kid their size, their weight, their age, and their skill level, and they're trying to choke them out or rip their arm off or break their shoulder, literally, I can't be there to help them.
Right.
I can coach them, which is what I do, but I can't jump out on that mat and do anything to help them. It's dynamic problem solving. So that's one of the ways that we've kind of hedged the potential for our kids to be spoiled is they have to earn the ability to have these vacations. They have to work their ass off in school. They have to work their ass off in the mat. School 5 days a week plus homework. On the mat 6-7 days a week.
Yep.
Sometimes double sessions.
Yep.
That's their life right now. And I'll tell you what, especially my 11 and 9-year-old Sal and Gio, they'll outwork most adults I know.
Yep.
It starts from that young age. It's inculcating them with that regimen, that discipline from a very young age. That way, by the time they're 18, like your kids' age, and they're in college and they're in high school applying to college and eventually going out in the working world and maybe starting their own business one day, it's not even going to be, they're not even going to question it because that's all they've known their whole life.
Right. It's just ingrained in them.
It's just ingrained. It's just part of who they are.
Yep.
Right. And maybe they took some from osmosis by seeing me work hard. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yep.
That's the trick right now. So, we talk about parenting and we talk about, raising the kids and balancing out running a business and raising your family. That's a big part of it, is making sure that all the victory that comes from a successful business doesn't spoil that next generation who ultimately would be the beneficiaries of that hard work. You want them to be the beneficiaries. You want to be able to give your kids all that good stuff.
Right.
But you have to balance it out, right? And they have to earn their keep. Yeah. And that's the trick, right? It never ends. It's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
It's an everyday thing.
Yeah, and sports is so big for that, man. It's funny because obviously I had a much different upbringing than my kids have, and I had to play football. It was part of my anger management. I was on juvenile probation. My probation officer is the one that signed me up for football. And I just played it to keep him off my back, and it was cool to hit people and that type of stuff. And then I got my kids into sports, man, and I've seen just what it's done for them, just in character building and the disciplines, right? You don't start something without finishing it. Bottom line, you're not going to sign up for fucking lacrosse, play for 3 weeks, decide you don't like it, and leave. You're committed. You're sticking it out, right? So we did that early on, and then it's, practices at this time. We want to get there 15, 20, 30 minutes early, get you set up, get you warmed up before practice, and it's, you start setting up these disciplines for them, and then playing hard on the field, and, the wins and the losses, man, watching them lose to really good teams and then watching them win against really good teams and what that does to them is so big. My youngest was just in the state championship, or not the state championship, but his division championship for club lacrosse, right? His team was ranked last going into the season. They made it all the way to the championship to play the number one team in the league. And the number one team in the league's been the number one team in the league forever, right? They were supposed to wipe the floor with Kimball Union. Kimball Union ended up taking them into overtime. They lost by a goal in overtime, but they tied it up with 3 seconds left and took it into overtime. Right before that game, my son was all fired up. He's captain of the lacrosse team and punches a fucking door. Dislocates 2 bones in his hand. So I get a call. I'm on the campus, and they're like, "Hey, you got to come get Devin. He's got to go to the hospital." I'm like, "Fuck, what happened?" So I get there, and he's shows me his hand, and pushed right out of his wrist, sticking straight up. So I had to bring him to the ER. They had to wrap him up, set the bones back into place, wrap him up. And he was fucking dragging me out of there to get back for the end of the game. Not that he could play, but he just wanted to be there for his team. And then the kid that scored the final goal that beat us was the kid Devin would have been defending if Devin wasn't an idiot and punched the wall. I had to put him on suicide watch for 3 days, dude. He took that to heart. Yeah. You know what I mean? But there's something to be learned in that. Yeah. You worked so hard all season long. You made one stupid mistake and it kind of screwed up your chance in this championship game. And then you inevitably lost. Who knows what would have happened if you played, but you would have been defending that guy. Yeah. And a
lot of growth there.
A lot of growth, man. Yep. And it hurts, right? It's hard. He fucking sobbed, right? And we were all crying for him. We felt terrible for him, and but what that does for him is just so much. I don't know where else you could find that
it's
outside
invaluable.
of sports.
It's invaluable, and especially at that age, as we become adults, there's business ventures, and we learn. There's growth there. We learn a lot, through trials and tribulations. But I feel like, as it relates to our upbringing in Salem and now being fathers, spare time, too much free time for a kid is the killer. That's where the problems happen. Think about it.
For sure.
Think about it.
Way too much free time.
That's where it all happens. That's where all the trouble happens. So it's like if these kids are thrust into a serious and competitive athletic environment from a young age, number one, they don't have the free time.
Yep.
It's non-existent. And then you have all the upside of the discipline, the hard work, the good mental, physical work, all that stuff. There's just so much upside. There's really no downside at all. But yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I we did jujitsu for a little bit. They both went into it a little. I wish that they kind of stuck with that, but again, lacrosse was the main thing. So it was hard to get that in.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the sport is, man. If you go all in and you're serious about it, it's competition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if it can get you scholarship for colleges and all this other stuff, like it's ideal. Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad that we kind of talked about that. The other thing that we talked about yesterday is kind of this, vision or, this glamorous look at what entrepreneurship is. You see it on social media. You see a lot of people kind of claiming to be entrepreneurs, right? And you have a pretty strong opinion as far as what that looks like.
Part of me finds it funny, but look, I think that social media can be a great tool, for certain people. And if some of these, personalities, I'll call them, on social media inspire people to get off their ass and it motivates them to go do something successful and worthy with their lives, great. That's a positive thing, right? That's a positive aspect of it. But let's not kind of paint this picture that it's as glamorous as some of these people make it out to be. True entrepreneurship, at least in my opinion, is not pretty. It's painful. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. In some cases, literally. In some cases, proverbially. But either way you cut it, you have to go through that fire. There's no two ways about it. Again, you could catch lightning in a bottle and it'd be the equivalent of hitting big on the lottery or something like that. That's not the norm. That's a rarity. But it's going to be a lot of sacrifice, a lot of questioning yourself. You learn a lot about yourself when you go through that process. You learn a lot about your resilience, your ability to maneuver, your ability to serve your customer, despite what you have going on in the background. One of the luxuries you have as an employee of a company is the ability to call in sick, the ability to take PTO, the ability to go on a vacation whenever the hell you want.
And shut your phone off.
Shut your phone off, not respond. And then mea culpa, you apologize for it later, and then you probably still have your job, right?
Yeah.
When you're the guy or girl and you're running the show and the buck stops with you, there's none of that.
Yeah.
There's no calling in sick. When I grew up, my dad went to work sick.
Yep.
He would run to the bathroom. If he had to throw up, he'd throw up and then come back out.
Yeah.
That's the way it was.
Yeah.
And so that's all I knew. When I worked at my prior employer before I started the business, I didn't call in sick. There was no sick. I didn't go on vacation.
Yeah. Because
I was on a small salary, but mostly on a commission structure.
Yep.
So every dollar I collected, I got a piece of.
Right.
Why the hell am I going to go sit on a beach somewhere where I could be making money?
Right.
That was my mentality at 22, 23, 25 years old.
Yep.
I had this vision of what I wanted to be. I wanted the big Mercedes. I wanted the big house. I wanted all this stuff. I'm not going to get it by sitting around, right? So I had to outwork everybody.
Yeah.
If for all these aspiring entrepreneurs that think that it's going to be easy or think that they can go online and figure it all out online, my opinion, at least for whatever it's worth, is that's not the way to go about it. I think you need to find something that interests you and go all in on it. That's the only way you're going to know whether you really like it or not. You might have this picture in your head of what you want to do, like I did. I thought I was going to go be an attorney. I thought that was the only way I was going to achieve what I thought was success. And guess what? I went into something completely different. I didn't even know what the industry was, right? But if you have that skill set, the intangible skills, there's no prerequisite for certain things. Most people I know, most successful business owners that I know, are not successful in a field that requires any sort of prior training or any sort of prerequisite type of degree. It's all intangible qualities they have. Perseverance, grit, determination, resilience, all these different adjectives that we can throw around. That's what they have.
Yep.
That's what they have. And they don't make fucking excuses.
And they have it, whatever they have it at 100%.
Yeah. It's just like they don't take days off.
Right.
They don't, there's no secret. Like I should probably start a social media site and like, start building up and talking about all this stuff because
it could be called the un-entrepreneur.
Yeah. It's like, it's insane to me. There's no secret. Just go work your ass off.
Yeah.
That's the secret.
Yeah.
That's the secret. Go work your fucking ass off
and figure
every day for many years. And guess what? You're going to look back and all of a sudden you're probably going to have what you wanted.
Yeah. And the thing is it's not going to be like that in every industry, right? Like you can work your ass off and do all this stuff and be an entrepreneur and only make $100,000 a year.
Yep.
Like that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing.
Absolutely.
You can work just as hard and have the life you want to live and do all this stuff. You don't have to be a multimillionaire. You don't have to be any of that. So for me, entrepreneur, there's no number put on that for me. We talked about it yesterday. For me to be called an entrepreneur or to consider someone an entrepreneur, they've been doing it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And they've done it day in and day out and have had to fail a few times. They've had to start over a few times. They've gone through all of these trials and tribulations and have been able to successfully, whatever that looks like financially, successfully pursue a passion for their career.
I'll give you one. I'll give you one. So in 2017, we landed the biggest client we had ever landed. Okay. And at this point, we had about 35 employees, nice brand new office in Windham, New Hampshire, which we're still in now. And this was the big time now. This was the whale, right? We had a bunch of other great clients and we had done very, very well. And we were smooth sailing. Like everything was on autopilot. All the partners were making good money. All the managers were making good money. Some of the collectors were making well into the six figures. Like these are kids that barely graduated out of high school.
Right.
I mean, everyone's doing well. And then finally we landed the big one. And I'll leave the name of the bank nameless right now. But we landed it. Okay. It's a household name bank. We've all heard of it. Everyone in this building's heard of this bank. Landed the bank. And when we got in, it was just like, oh my God, it further legitimized our business. It's like, wow, like, okay, this is another win, the biggest win. Long story short, about 18 months later, we lost them. Oh. And we had this big build out. We had to bring on we had to increase our staff by 45%.
Jesus.
Oh yeah. IT, security, data security, we had to add layer upon layer upon layer of build out for this thing. Add more square footage, non-load bearing walls, dropping those things down, construction. I mean, it was like a big deal. And we were doing really well for this client. That was the killer. We did really, really well. The reason we lost them was no doing of our own. It was they had a change in management. And that manager had the autonomy to pick and choose the vendors they wanted. They brought in their own people from a prior relationship that they had, and we were the first ones in. We were the last ones in. We were the first ones out. Ugh. That's basically what happened. And and this is the kicker. There was no warning. I got a certified letter one day. In the mail.
Jesus.
In the mail.
They didn't even have a conversation with you?
No conversation. Nothing.
Man.
I'm sitting in my office and it's, 3 p.m. The mail had just come in. I'm slicing and dicing. I'm looking at everything. And all of a sudden, certified letter. Okay, great. What is this? From Bank ABC. And hand signed by my contact, who I talk to, once a quarter or once a month. We'd have our monthly, calls. And it was just like probably one of the biggest punches in the gut I've ever had.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, we really could. I mean, this really could take us out now because we've built out.
Right.
We've taken on all this as an investment towards this client. And I mean, it was one of those moments where, again, we talk about it. The failures don't just happen in the first month of the first year.
They continue.
We were 13, 14 years in.
Right.
Doing real well, like multi-million-dollar company.
Right.
And then some. And all of a sudden this happens and it's like, you can never get complacent.
Yeah.
You can never get complacent, and you always have to maintain that resilience. The easiest time to crumble is when you've built yourself up in your head and you've built yourself up in your business, and then all of a sudden you get that punch, you get that casualty. Can you withstand it then?
Right.
Because back then you were hungry, you were vicious, you were roaring, right?
Yeah, lean and mean.
But lean and mean. But as you get older, maybe you get a little softer. As you get more comfortable, maybe you get a little softer and not as resilient and not as hungry. Do you still have it then? That's another real test, right? And that was back in 2017, and here we are 7 years later. We went through COVID, and we've come out a even stronger company, even bigger, even more successful, bigger bottom line, bigger top line, and ultimately we had our exit. So my point in telling you that, and to anybody listening, is number one, don't just think for any existing entrepreneur, for any existing business owner, don't just think that because you have a successful business today, that guarantees anything in the future. We're not guaranteed anything.
Yep.
Just like we're not guaranteed our health, we're not guaranteed success in business. I don't care what clients you have signed up. I don't care what contracts you have. I don't care how many zeros are at the end of that number in the bank account. It goes away. It comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. I've seen it, not just with my business, other businesses.
Yep.
It comes and it goes, and you need to be ready to maneuver and to pivot and to deal with everything.
Yeah.
Your head has to be in the game at all times.
Yeah.
Otherwise, again, go do something else.
Right.
Sell the whole damn thing and just go do something else. Go punch a clock, whatever.
Yeah, I was actually listening to another podcast my oldest son put me on. And this guy is in the tech field or tech industry, and has built like 2 or 3 huge businesses and sold them off and stuff. In between each one of his sales, like after he sells his business and before he starts something new, he goes to work at like fucking McDonald's or like a gas station. He does these stupid little jobs just to bring him back down to ground to kind of build that hunger back up before he goes back off. I was like, man, that's a fucking cool thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that.
That's beautiful.
I always said, like, if I, someday when I sell it all and retire, I'm going to go be a bartender at like a little tiki bar in like the Bahamas or something. Yeah. Like, because I don't want to deal with like people at like TGI Friday.
Right.
I want to deal with the people that like are on vacation, traveling the world. Like, I want to hear their stories.
Yeah.
And, just have a little tiki bar somewhere.
I love it.
You know what I mean? That'd be awesome. Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk a little bit about your business. We've talked a lot about business, but we didn't really talk about your business.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really cool industry, because everybody knows about it, but I've never actually met somebody that like owns and operates a business like that. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So Bell & Williams Associates is a repossession management company and a collection agency. So we operate on a national level in all 50 states. Our clients are banks and equipment finance companies. So think about if you go finance a car, or if you're a truck driver, you go finance a semi-truck or a truck trailer, or if you're an agricultural worker and you have a farm and you go finance a John Deere tractor, or if you're in construction, you go finance Komatsu or Caterpillar. Those are our clients. Those are the types of clients that we serve. So when they have customers who don't pay them on time, they send the assignments to our office for either to try and collect the past due balance or coordinate a repossession of the equipment, the collateral, whatever it might be, car, truck, boat, ATV, semi-truck, construction equipment, you name it. If it's a tangible item that can be repossessed, we can repossess it. Yeah. So we physically don't go out and perform the repossession. We don't have any field agents, that are employees of ours. We have about, 65, 70 people in our office. Okay. And they're on the phone all day coordinating a queue of accounts. They're responsible for managing a queue of assignments that are sent over by our clients. We have a network of about 700 field agents nationwide that are licensed, bonded, and insured in the states that they operate in by our compliance officer. And we subcontract out the work for them. So we're a management company. We're essentially a management company. We manage portfolios for banks. Delinquent portfolios for banks.
Delinquent portfolios for banks.
Yeah. So people that don't pay their car loan on time, people don't pay their equipment loan on time, we manage those accounts for the banks.
So interesting. Like you would think that before we met, I would think that the bank has their own office or, employees for those types of services.
They do. They do.
Okay.
But in many cases, they don't have the resources or the time to train these people properly in the real nuanced steps that are required to go recover these things.
Interesting.
Most people that are past due are doing it not because they intentionally want to not pay their bill.
Right.
They're doing it because they're juggling their bills, right? It's not necessarily that they don't have the intention to pay. They might not have just the means to pay right now, right? So our job is to make sure that that bill takes precedence over their other obligations. And one way we do that is leveraging repossession. So if we actually dispatch a repo agent out to the house, the chances are, if they have the ability to pay, they're going to pay it real quick. Or if they don't, we'll repossess it. Either way, we monetize that transaction.
Interesting.
And it's a critical part of the economy because interest rates that are afforded by banks to a consumer like you, I, or anybody else walking down the street, part of it has to do with how healthy their portfolio is. The way they can lend out at a certain rate is not just the way they borrow money at the rate they borrow money at, but also how healthy their portfolio is. It's a critical piece of the economy. If people don't pay their bills on time, these banks are going to be in a real tough spot, right? So it just keeps the chains of the economy moving, right?
Yeah, and to have somebody that's dedicated to managing that for your bank or for your establishment, like, I can imagine that's key.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and the details matter. It's we're dealing with real fine details of a transaction, dollars and cents, right? So everybody in my office has to have a very high attention to detail. Everybody in my office has to be able to have good communication skills on the phone and in writing. In many cases, our collectors that are on the floor, they're dealing with the bank directly, our client. They're calling in for an update on an assignment. They're calling in because the customer says their car was just repossessed, but we don't have a repossession notice. All these different things are coming out throughout the day. So somebody that sits in that seat that works in our office has to be able to pivot on a dime and have really good skill set in terms of working on multiple things at one time,
right?
And be a taskmaster, right? Yeah. They're on the phone. Maybe they're double fisting phone calls. They have an email. They've got an agent out in the field repossessing a car. A client's calling in on the other line. There's a lot going on.
God, that's got to be a tough job, man.
It is.
It's going to be hard because obviously the people that you're talking to, the end consumer, is not somebody that's happy.
They're not happy. They're not happy.
So you have to manage that in a way where I assume you're not being an asshole. Like you can't be mean to them because they're obviously in a hard spot.
Customer service is a huge part of it. You have to be able to maintain your cool and be professional under stress.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard when someone's swearing at you on the other line or when someone's very angry on the other line. All calls are recorded, all calls are monitored, and all calls are scored. Right? A lot of these banks we're doing business with, these are household name, publicly traded banks that have boards of directors that are PR conscious.
Yep.
So we're not dealing with, some local credit union or something. These are huge financial institutions. So as their vendor, we need to be vetted.
Yeah.
So that's why we have multiple compliance officers. We have, very rigid training programs.
I was going to say, what's the training program look like? I mean, you must have to find... I guess, how do you find your employees, the ones that are on the front lines, the ones that are making the phone calls and managing these calls and stuff? And then what kind of training do you provide for them? Because it's not a natural ability for people. It's got to be something that's trained.
Yeah, this is not an industry that people go to school for, right? Yeah. We talked about that yesterday. I didn't go to school to become a debt collector or go into the collections business. It's one of those industries that is just born out of necessity, right? The U.S. economy has a need for this, and hundreds of years ago, debt collectors existed, right? Whether they were bartering out on the street, on cobblestone roads, right out here probably, right?
Yeah.
And someone didn't pay what they were supposed to pay, there would be debt collection, right? Well, fast forward the tape, here we are. And this is our version of debt collection. It's collecting on debt. And there's all sorts of different tranches of debt in the U.S. economy. You have student loans, you have credit card debt, you have cell phone bills, right? You have medical debt. That's another huge one, right? We deal with collateralized debt, which means there's a piece of collateral attached to the loan versus a credit card. There's no collateral. Right. It's just you sign your name, you get a credit card.
Medical loan, there's no collateral.
Medical, there's no collateral, right? We deal with collateralized debt. And the reason I was attracted to that when I opened my company is that it makes the debt easier to collect. People need their car to go to work. They need their car to take their kid to school.
They need their tractor to do
They need their tractor to put food on the table. Right? So they're going to be more motivated and take that debt much more seriously. It makes our job easier.
Makes sense.
In some ways, it makes it easier. In other areas, we're not just calling the customer, making persistent demands for money. We have to now triage with our field agent to make sure that they actually go out to the location, they're behaving in a compliant way. We're dealing with moving, in some cases, big pieces of equipment. We need to go get permits, wide load permits. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. At the end of the day, it's financially rewarding, and there's no prerequisite knowledge that's required to get into the industry. But what is required is having all of these skills that sometimes can't be taught. Sometimes you either have it or you don't. The ability to work under stress, the ability to multitask, the ability to be resilient. A lot of these things that are required of business owners.
Right.
I guarantee you there's many kids in my office, and full disclosure, I'm 44 years old, so anyone 30 or younger I call a kid. So there's many kids in my office. I'm sure they would be very successful business people outside this industry because they have the grit, they have it, right? Whether they want to go do it and spend the time to do it, that's a different story. But it's kind of a microcosm. Our industry is kind of a microcosm of the larger picture of being a business owner. A lot of those same qualities. So the reason I bring it up is because you mentioned how do you train it. There's certain training for sure, and there's very client-specific training because each bank wants things done their own way. Each bank has their own pricing schedule. Each bank has its own different type of collateral. One bank might have semi-trucks and trailers. We hire different repo agents to secure that stuff than we do agricultural equipment, right? Yep. So there's all those different nuances, and that's the kind of in-the-weeds training that we provide. But most of it is not trained. Most of it, they kind of hone their own craft, just like I did when I got on the phone. I didn't go to school for this, right? But when I was a collector sitting in that seat, you kind of learn on the fly, and you have to think quick. Yep. You're on the phone with somebody that owes money. How do I convince them to pay? Yeah. How do you're selling them. Right. It's sales. It's basically reverse sales.
It's crazy.
It's sales.
Yeah.
And that goes back to another point that I think is very important, and that is if I could impart one skill set in my sons that could be parlayed into any industry, the ability to sell.
Yeah.
The ability to sell. Because if you're actually going in business for yourself, you're going to have to sell.
Right.
I don't care what the industry
Services,
is.
product.
It could be medical devices. It
Yeah.
could be services. It could be a product. It could be slinging pizza pies.
Yep.
You have to sell.
Yeah. And even if you had the best pizza pie or you had the best whatever it is, if you can't sell it, it doesn't matter.
There's that old expression, the product sells itself.
Yeah.
You could have the best product, but if you don't put it out there in a way that's consumable to your buyer, it could be all for naught.
Yeah.
You have to, that quality of sales is critical in business.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Yeah, because I mean, there's nothing out there. There's no business out there whatsoever that doesn't have like a sales point. Yeah. And I would have said debt collection, you don't have to sell anything, but it's the same thing.
We're selling these people on why they need to pay us.
Right.
And we're also selling the banks on why they should do business with us.
Right. So who goes out and gets those accounts?
The banks.
Yeah.
At first, it was me and my business partner, and now we have a sales team.
So you have a sales team that goes and tries to acquire new accounts.
Yep. It's a combination of referrals from existing clients
who
might have worked in another bank before. They still are friends with somebody there. They still have some sort of a professional association with ABC Bank. Hey, you got to do business with these guys. They really know what they're doing. They're compliant. They're successful, right? We're pitted against other competitors. So when we work a portfolio for a top 10 bank, we're not the only vendor. There are 3 or 4 other national vendors we compete with every single month and or quarter. So we can't just rest on our laurels. If we had a great month, September 1st, it's back down to 0.
Yep.
Right? And it's off to the races again.
Interesting. Yeah.
What have you done for me lately? And again, that's why I love the industry, because it's very reflective of this country and the climate of entrepreneurship in and of itself.
Right.
What have you done for me lately? You can't rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
You could be 6 months straight, 1 year straight. We've been the number one vendor for this client, but 1 month you might have a little blip. 1 month you might lose a key collector on that portfolio, and that could have disastrous effects. And how do you recover? As a manager of that portfolio or the CEO of the company, how do you answer to that? How do you recover from that? You can never rest. That's another piece of entrepreneurship. You can never rest. And a lot of these online personalities, they might not tell you that. They might not tell you that.
It's because they rest on a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Because that, just thinking about that and trying to sell that service, right? It's not like you can fucking start an Instagram account and be like, hey, we want to be your debt collector.
No. My clients aren't on Instagram.
Right.
No, my clients are on Wall Street or they're sitting in a corporate headquarters somewhere.
Yeah.
Those are my clients, right? And so our salespeople are either getting them from referrals from existing clients. That's the way it is now because we've built up a huge portfolio.
And you've been in the
and our
business
name's
for a while.
out there, exactly. Right. But at first, I'll go back to the wooden table I was sitting at my dining room, my business partner, cold calls. Small little credit unions, local credit unions, regional banks, little five and dimes, stuff like that. Local banks. Hey, do you guys, I know you guys write auto loans, little credit union down in Nashua. You guys write auto loans, right? Look at, we're nationwide. I know you might have a local repo agent that does stuff for you, but inevitably you're lending out on mobile collateral that could be out in California, Hawaii. I can handle that for you. I'm licensed everywhere. Give us the accounts that they couldn't resolve.
Yeah.
Let me cut my teeth on that first. That was the pitch back then.
I love that.
That was the pitch back then. I'll take anything. Give me this. I don't want the fresh stuff. Don't give me that. It's too early. Give me the stuff they couldn't resolve. Let me demonstrate to you how much better I am than them. They couldn't resolve these accounts. Let me see what I can do. Let me take a crack at it.
You just sold me, and I don't even have a bank.
It's an easy sell.
Yeah.
That's the easiest sell. That, and then we would undercut our prices. We would take much less profit just to get our foot in the door.
Yeah.
You just need to get your foot in the door
show your service.
and then let your work speak for itself.
Yep.
And if you're really that good and if you're worthy, you're going to get the work.
Yep.
You're going to get another bite at the apple. You're going to get a referral. That's how we did it.
Yep.
That's how we did it from day one. Referral after referral after referral. Cold call, cold call, cold call. And then all of a sudden, it's like, you get to this point where it just, everything comes together.
Yeah.
Everything starts coming together. And then you get invited to like RFPs. Some of these big banks, they'll do RFPs. All of a sudden, we're getting invited to RFPs. We don't even have to call them. They're calling us. Hey, we're expanding our portfolio. We're merging with this bank. We need another vendor. Would you like to be part of our RFP? And that's when you can play it cool. Be like, I think we might be able to take on a little bit. You know what I mean? You can. Now you're sitting in that seat, and it's like the dream becomes real.
Yep.
But you have to go through all that stuff first.
Do you still go after, or does your company still go out after new sales?
Of course we do.
Okay.
Of
How
course
big's
we
the
do.
sales team?
We've got 4 people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. It's a relatively small market. This isn't like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's only so many.
There's only so many banks. There's only so many lenders out there.
Right.
But there's certainly some that we don't have, and we do certain things to make sure we get in front of them, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it's a waiting game. Sometimes they might be under contract for like 3 years with their current stable of vendors. No problem. You have to be patient.
Yep.
You have to be patient and
persistent.
And persistent, but persistent to the point that you're not annoying.
Yep.
Right?
It's a tough
You
balance
have
there.
to walk that fine line. That's another subset of skills within sales skills, is walking the fine line of being persistent but not annoying and alienating to your potential target.
Yep.
Because the second you start doing that, good luck.
Yeah.
People do business with people they want to do business with.
Yep.
Sometimes it's purely about performance. Sometimes it's not just about performance. Performance is the non-negotiable tactic, but they also have to like you.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you could be the best at what you do, but you need to be the complete package as well. It's not just good enough to be the best.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about it in my industry, it's the same thing, right? Like our cabinet shop in Rowley is only 5 years old.
Yep.
There's a lot of builders that we work with that have been doing it for 30, 40 years.
Sure.
They've had that relationship with the cabinet company that they've been using forever, right? So it's a matter of, when we do our cold calls and we're, trying to bring in like new contractors and new builders, we're doing the same thing. Calling them, hey, listen, this is what we do. This is what we offer. We'd love to take a shot. Like, even if you just have a bathroom or, whatever it is, we just want a shot,
Yep.
And it's, maybe you don't hear from them for a few months, but you just kind of maybe 2 or 3 months later, give them another call, shoot them another email, say, hey, just want to touch base. Haven't heard from you. Try not to be annoying, but you also want to be forefront in their thought process for if something does happen with that other company, they can be like, oh, well, we've had this guy, Frank, that's been calling us. Let's give him a shot, and then you got to take that opportunity and do the best with that opportunity that you can do and hopefully make them happy, and
No job too big or small. That was the thought too when we first started out. It's like, oh, you have 10,000 accounts you need serviced. Oh, you only have one. No problem. It's like sometimes you need to play up what you can do.
Yep.
And figure it out.
Yeah.
Honestly, because you don't want to not take a sale.
Right.
You run the risk of falling flat on your face, but if you're all about it and you're in it, you will find a way.
Yeah.
You just find a way.
Yeah.
I never bought into that sales tactic of, oh, I don't know, that might be a little too much for me. Are you fucking out of your mind?
No.
Do you want to grow your business or not?
Right.
Okay, get the business in-house because you may never get this opportunity again.
Yep.
This may never come again.
Right.
And you're just gonna piss it away?
Yeah.
No
way. There's nothing too big as far as I go with business.
Exactly. You'll find a way.
Yeah. There's maybe some stuff that's like, I wouldn't say too small, but just kind of a bother, right?
Yep.
So if you do somebody calls us for a 36-inch vanity. Like,
Yep.
yeah, we can do that. You know,
Yep. I
we'll
hear
get
what
it
you're
done.
saying, but the message though to that kid coming up or person coming up is that little vanity could turn into a monster.
Well, let me tell you the story. So it's funny.
I'm sure there's a story.
Yeah,
we all have them. But to anyone listening, don't discount the small stuff.
for sure. Yep.
Go
for
ahead.
Sure.
I wanna hear it.
For sure. So 36-inch vanity, right? We
Yep.
got a customer, wicked nice lady. And I treat everybody like they're doing $1 million kitchen. Like that's just who I am.
Absolutely.
And it's not a sales pitch. It's just my character.
Yeah.
Like I like building relationships with people. I like talking to them about their projects and whatever I can do to help, right? Lady came in, really nice lady, her and her husband. And they're like, yeah, we just built a house. We just need a 36-inch vanity. We did our kitchen already with somebody else. And I was like, all right, no problem. Like, we designed it for her. And had a really good just back and forth conversations, like in getting the design done and kind of getting the countertops done. Everything went smoothly, no issues whatsoever. 2 years later, I get a call from her brother. He's moving up from South Carolina or North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, and says, hey, I was just at my sister's house. This is her name. I saw the bathroom. Kitchen was really pretty, but she had some issues with that company. I saw the bathroom. She said, you guys were great. I'd like to work with you. I'm like, all right, sweet, man. Yeah, just let us know what you want. And that turned into, I think we ended up doing like 130,000 in cabinets with them.
That's the thing.
And it's like,
that's the story.
and that's what I tell everybody. Because, sometimes the girls in the office, they don't want to do just the countertops. They don't want to work with the customer that wants to do just hardware. Mm-hmm. But I always tell them, like, listen, that's an opportunity down the road that could turn into something more. Like, we've got to treat everybody the same way.
It's always there. If not from that one individual, it'll be from their friend. It'll be from their sister. It'll be from their boss.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works.
For sure. Yeah. Cool, man. We got into a lot here. I don't even know where we're at. I guess we'll kind of get into, the last segment, Toolbox Tips. And before we get into Toolbox Tips, anybody that's listening, we are, if you like the podcast, if you like these conversations, if you're getting anything from this podcast, please like and subscribe the podcast. I'm paying out of pocket to make this thing happen. There's no advertisements. There's no nothing like that. All we need is subscribers and likes to really kind of get the engagement up. We'd appreciate it. So getting into Toolbox Tips, man, this is just kind of the segment, and you've given a shit ton of advice, but what would be that one piece of advice for anybody that's looking to start their own business, get into the industry, somebody that's hungry, that just wants to get going, right? What's your advice for that person, that one piece of advice?
You can never be too honest. You can never have too many friends, and you can never be too wealthy. I feel like in this day and age, being wealthy and accumulating wealth is frowned upon. That should be the goal.
Yeah.
Right? The independence that wealth provides is the ultimate goal. Right? You're going to be able to live the life you want to live. Most people go into business because they love what they do and they want to achieve a higher level of success than they would had they gone to work for somebody else. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right? All these steps along the way, you have to embrace them and learn from them. Okay? You're going to get knocked down. We've talked about it all the time. There's a million adjectives to describe the toil that an entrepreneur or a business founder goes through. You're going to lose clients. You're going to feel nervous. You're going to get sick. You're going to have people laugh at you. You're going to have people scoff at you. You're going to have doubters. You're going to have jealousy. That's another thing that we didn't even get into.
For sure.
Maybe that's next time. But it's like dealing with that piece of it as well. You need to just be laser focused, put the blinders on, and put the business first. The business comes first before yourself.
Yep.
At least for me. I'm just talking about myself.
Yep.
Okay. And the way I did it, the business came first. It came before myself. It came before my relationships, for better or for worse.
Yep.
I'm not saying the way I did it was the right way to do it, but that was the only way I felt confident that I would give myself the best chance at success, was putting the business first. I lost friends. I'm not proud to say it, but that was a casualty of my modus operandi, if you will, in my 20s and even into my 30s. As we were building the business is, I would have to say no to everything. Get invited to this, get invited to that. Sorry, I can't make it. Sorry, I can't make it. Sorry, I can't make it. All of a sudden, you don't get the invites anymore.
Yep.
Okay? That's part of it. That's a cost of doing business. Everybody talks about the cost of doing business. The real costs aren't dollars and cents, in my opinion, because the money, again, it comes and goes. The real costs are how lives are affected by what you do, right? And at the end of the day, I don't feel bad about it, because now on the other end of it, when I write a check for charity, when I give my kids my time, when I give my wife my time, when I'm able to go out and do something for the betterment, when I'm able to sit down with a kid that wants to open his own business and maybe seed him, or maybe just give him my time and advice, I wouldn't be able to do those things had I not been selfish in my 20s and 30s, okay? So, you know, when I talk about advice on it's not just how to start a business, it's how to run the business and how to operate as a human being when you achieve success. It's not just how do you get it going. Getting it going, part of that's kind of the easier part, in my opinion. In some ways, that's the easier part. But once you hit that level that you always wanted to hit, then what?
Right.
Then what? How do you behave? How are you acting as a human being when there's all kinds of zeros in the bank account? How do you behave? Are you still humble? Do you still? I love to take someone to dinner. Somebody that wants me to invest in their little business, I love taking them to breakfast. I love taking them to lunch. I like to see how they treat the waiter. How do they treat that busboy? I love it. It's a huge reflection in their character. Those are the things that does not show up on a balance sheet, that won't show up in income statements and financials and all that stuff. So, you know, my parting words, I guess, for anyone listening that wants to start their business, your passion has to be unwavering. You have to put the business first. Otherwise, you're not giving yourself the best chance at success. I can't say it enough. So many businesses fail because people quit too early. You never would have known what would have been had you stuck with it. And that doesn't just go for businesses. It's similar to relationships. How many relationships fail because sometimes people don't just stick with it? Just stick with it. Fuck it. You had a fight? Fuck it. You lost a client in business? Just keep going. Yeah. Keep going and going and going. Eventually, you'll come out on top, because guess what? All your competitors, they gave up. Yep. They're the ones that gave up, right? So again, it's not just hard work. It's not just resilience. It's not all those adjectives. Pick an adjective. These online personalities have them all. But it's that over time. It has to be over time. Those are the real businesses. The real successful business people that I know, it was a labor of love, but it was 5, 10, 15 years sometimes before they actually achieved what they wanted to achieve.
Yep.
You got to have the long game. Play that long game. What else?
That's fucking fantastic, man. I love that. Yeah, great advice. I don't even know. I can't even follow it up, man. I loved it. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Sal. I'm glad we got to do this.
I was happy to.
Have to have you on again.
Yeah, let's do it.
You know, we'll talk again and, you know, talk a little bit about business and kind of maybe things have changed or what's going on. But yeah, man, I think this was great. I appreciate all of your insight and
one last thing.
Definitely know what you're talking about.
Don't believe everything you see online.
It's the truth.
Don't believe everything you see online. It's people can create and paint a picture that they want to paint, but you need to peel back those layers of the onion, you know, to see what's really there and how they got there, and if they even got there. You don't know,
right?
But just focus on yourself. Do less talking and more work.
Oh,
don't even tell people. If you land a major client, don't even tell anybody.
Yep.
Because that's when you have to start dealing with a lot of the jealousy, a lot of everything else. Just keep focusing. Because guess what? You landed that client today, they could be gone tomorrow.
Right.
And then what? You're going to go tell everybody you lost them?
Right. Yeah.
Have that conversation.
Yeah.
See how that goes.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, makes sense.
That's it, boss.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate
Thanks
you
for coming on.
Thanks, man.
See you guys next time.